When I think about what makes a truly great ending to a story, something that manages to take everything that had been previously built up throughout it and finish it in a way that makes sense, is satisfying, and resonates with me long after it's ended, there's one ending that immediately comes to mind, and that's a tragic but beautiful ending to the absolutely exceptional Red Dead Redemption 2. For those who haven't played the game, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a Western action shooter game released in 2018, and in it you play as Arthur Morgan, a gunslinging member of the infamous Van der Linde gang. And as Arthur, you go through the story and the rapidly modernizing American frontier, robbing, fighting, shooting, killing, and doing whatever else it takes to survive and provide enough money for your family of criminals and outlaws living in a world that seems to be outgrowing their old-fashioned ways. And right out the gate, we get to know Arthur as a character, and as we do, we learn that he believes himself to be a bad man who does bad things and nothing more. However, we can also see early on that this isn't inherently the case, as depending on your choices as Arthur, you could show that he has a good-natured, helpful side to him, like when he helped save Sadie Adler from the O'Driscolls that killed her husband, or even when he did something as simple as help a man on the side of the road get his horse back after it ran off on him. And it's also right from the start that we see Arthur and his relationship to the other members of the gang, especially the one between Arthur and his father figure Dutch Van der Linde, the leader of the Van der Linde gang. Ever since he was recruited into the gang as a kid, along with his eventual friend John Marston, Arthur was raised by Dutch and was always taught that the most important things in life were family and freedom. So, Arthur grew up to essentially become the muscle to Dutch's brains, his right-hand man and the enforcer of his will, and as more people joined up with the gang, he began to protect them like they were his own family, one that he would provide for, fight for, kill for, and willingly die for. As the game's story progresses, the gang realizes that in order to escape the law and head out west to freedom, they need to earn money, and Arthur becomes one of the main sources of income for the camp. And one of the ways he earns money is via debt collection missions from the man who is basically the camp's accountant, Leopold Strauss. Of these missions, one of them sends Arthur after a farmer named Thomas Downs to collect the large amount of money he had borrowed from Herr Strauss. However, Downs is unable to pay back the money, and so Arthur beats him before leaving, and when he returns later, Thomas's widow tells Arthur that he was sick and died of his wounds before leaving their debt-riddled farm, eventually having to turn tricks in St. Denis and Annesburg in order to provide for herself and her son Archie. This becomes important later into the story, as in their scuffle, Mr. Downs coughs on Arthur, and for the next few chapters he begins to develop a slight cough. Soon enough, his coughing becomes so bad that he falls unconscious off of his horse and barely manages to make his way to a doctor's office in St. Denis. Once he's examined, the doctor gives him the worst possible news he could hear.
What is it?
It's not good news.
I guess that.
You got tuberculosis. Really sorry for you, son. It's a hell of a thing.
What you mean?
You're real sick. It's a progressive disease, and you'll be... Well, the best thing is rest, and getting somewhere warm and dry and taking it easy. Now, is that possible?
Sure, I can just take my winters in my country club in California. No, it's not possible.
Well, like I said, I'm real sorry.
This is where Arthur's arc becomes more defined, as he decides that he's going to use what little time he has left to help those who he can, both within the gang and outside of it. This also leads Arthur to becoming much more open about his reservations and doubts in Dutch's ever-changing plans that all seem to fail and result in people they care about getting killed, like during the botched bank heist in St. Denis that leads to Jose and Lenny being shot dead and John being captured by the Pinkertons. After Hosea's death, Dutch begins to go off the deep end into paranoia and believing that his family is turning against him one by one, and becomes much more antagonistic towards Arthur, claiming that he's lost faith. And with his trust in Arthur gone, he begins to listen more and more to one of their newest members, Micah, who from day one had done nothing but antagonize the other members of the gang, get himself and the gang into trouble, and kill people who didn't need to be killed. Seeing this change in Dutch only makes Arthur more resolved to help the gang members escape with their lives while they still can, and he also begins to go out of his way to help others outside the gang more, such as the Native Americans that were also being chased and tormented by the US Army. In one mission, he and his fellow gang member Charles Smith went to the Wapiti Indian Reservation to try and help in a peace talk between the native chief Rainsfall and the sadistic Colonel Favors, only for them to have to escape with a man named Captain Monroe who was sympathetic to the natives' plight and was to be executed for supposed treason for wanting to help them. So the three manage to escape the army and make it to a train station in Emerald Ranch. After Monroe gets on a train to escape and Charles rides back to the reservation to help the natives, Arthur runs into a nun named Sister Calderon, who he had previously run into and helped out a few times in some side missions that could be found in Saint Denis, and after Arthur begins to cough up a storm, the two sit and begin to talk, and then we get this exchange.
I'm dying, sister.
Okay?
Yeah, I got TB. I got it. Beating a man to death for a few bucks. I've lived a bad life, sister.
We've all lived bad lives, Mr. Morgan. We all sin. But I know you.
You don't know me.
Forgive me, but that's the problem. You don't know you.
What do you mean?
I don't know, but whenever we happen to meet, you're always helping people and smiling.
But I still don't believe in nothing.
Often, neither do I. But then I meet someone like you, and everything makes sense.
You're too smart for me, sister. I guess I'm afraid.
There is nothing to be afraid of, Mr. Morgan. Take a gamble that love exists and do a loving act.
And it's this conversation that drives Arthur throughout the rest of the game, and it's here that Arthur becomes especially set on making sure that John, his wife Abigail, and their son Jack are able to get away and start a new life, even if it costs him his own in the process. Not too long after this, Abigail gets captured by the leader of the Pinkertons, Agent Milton, and in the process of getting her back, Arthur and Sadie Adler figure out that Micah is actually a rat giving information to the Pinkertons in order to save his own skin. So Arthur kills Milton and escapes with Sadie and Abigail, telling them to head to Copperhead Landing, where Jack and Tilly are waiting, and wait for him and John to come back for them. Back at their camp in Beaver Hollow, Arthur confronts Micah and Dutch, and a standoff breaks loose between them, but it's broken by John coming back to camp and revealing that Dutch had left him for dead. Soon after his return, the Pinkertons show up and a firefight breaks out, in which Dutch and Micah disappear, and Arthur makes a final decision that is entirely up to the player, where he can either help John escape and make it back to his wife and son, or go back to Beaver Hollow to get the money that Dutch had squirreled away in the caves below it. And it's here that I want to say that while I do believe that any playstyle and choice the player makes are valid and they have the right to choose whatever they want, it's always been my personal belief that the ending that makes the most sense to Arthur's character and the story as a whole is the one where he decides to help John, because I don't see any reason why he would go back for the money considering he's about to die, but rather he would want to make his final moments actually worth something. So that'll be the ending that we're going to discuss today. So the two go on, fighting their way through Pinkertons and up a mountain in order to escape with their lives. However, Arthur realizes that he's not going to be able to go any further, so he tells John to get away with his family and stays behind to fight off the enemy. But then, Arthur gets attacked by Micah and the two fight, and Arthur gets beaten down hard. As he tries to reach for his gun, he's stopped by Dutch, but Arthur then pleads with Dutch that Micah is the rat and states that John is the only one who got away, which causes Dutch to realize what he's done and walk away, leaving Micah to angrily run off as well. Arthur, struggling to breathe his final breaths, crawls his way to the edge of the mountain face and lies facing the sunrise, which mirrors something that he had said earlier with his now departed family about how he wanted to be buried.
What about you, Arthur?
Me? I don't care about that nonsense.
Come on.
Face me to the west so I can watch the setting sun and remember all the fine times we had that way.
See, Tilly? I told you Arthur had a soul.
He then succumbs to his illness and injuries, and dies seeing an image of a deer, an image that had followed him throughout the entirety of the game, symbolizing the honorable end to his troubled life. To me, this is one of the few scenes I have actually seen in any media that I would call perfect. From the way it's built up perfectly throughout the entire game, to the emotional and exciting climax that we get, to the absolutely heartbreaking voice work and lines that all make this scene one of only 3 video games to ever make me cry. And of those 3, this one easily takes number 1 spots simply because I cry every single time I play this game to the end. And I get a little choked up as well during the epilogue, since if you return to that mountain as John, you can see a grave put up to honor Arthur's memory, facing the rising sun. So yeah, this is easily one of the, if not the best endings to any video game or any other story that I have ever experienced, thanks in no small part to the absolutely stellar performance of Roger Clark as Arthur Morgan. And it's just one of the dozens of reasons why Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. And a big thank you to Nando V Movies for hosting One Last Scene, a collaboration between a bunch of different YouTube reviewers and video essayists like myself, where we get together and talk about the endings of our favorite movies, TV shows, video games, and whatever else may qualify. I'm bummed that this is the only one of these collaborations I was able to participate in, but it was fun to revisit one of my favorite pieces of media ever, and I'm glad I was able to do it at all. Link to the playlist is in the description, so thank you and good night.